Ambassador Jake Morrison adjusted his tie for the 15th time as he stood before the towering crystalline structure that housed the Galactic Council. After 3 years of paperwork, diplomatic meetings, and what could only be described as the universe's most bureaucratic hazing ritual, Earth's membership application was finally being reviewed. The council chamber was everything Jake had expected from a species that took themselves way too seriously. Floating platforms arranged in a perfect circle, each occupied by beings who looked like they'd graduated from the Academy of Condescending Stares with honors. The centerpiece was Vextar the Pretentious, a 7-foot-tall purple creature whose species apparently evolved extra limbs just to have more ways to gesture dramatically. Earth delegation, Vextar announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested he'd practiced this speech in the mirror. After careful consideration of your application for membership in the Galactic Council, we have reached our decision. Jake straightened up, trying to ignore the way his human sweat was probably offending half the species in the room. 3 years of this. 3 years of explaining why humans deserved a seat at the big kids' table. Your species shows promise, Vextar continued, and Jake felt a flicker of hope. However, you lack the necessary technological sophistication for full membership. Your hyperspace capabilities are primitive at best, your energy production methods are quaint, and frankly, your diplomatic protocols are charmingly naive. Jake's eye twitched. Charmingly naive. Right. Furthermore, Vextar was really getting into it now. Your species has a disturbing tendency toward independence and innovation that could disrupt the established order we have worked millennia to perfect. Wait, were they seriously rejecting Earth because humans were too innovative? Jake cleared his throat. Counselor Vextar, if I may ask for clarification, are you saying Earth is being denied membership because we're too creative? Precisely. Vextar beamed, apparently missing the problem with this logic entirely. The Council values stability, tradition, and adherence to proven methods. Your species' habit of, quote, thinking outside the box, end quote, could introduce chaos into our perfectly ordered system. Jake stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for everyone involved, including the crystalline beings who didn't technically have nerves. I see, Jake said finally. So let me get this straight. We're too primitive to join your club, but also too innovative. We're simultaneously not advanced enough and too disruptive. Do I have that right? Exactly. Vextar clapped 2 of his 4 hands together. I knew you would understand eventually. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when your species has learned to appreciate the beauty of conformity, you may reapply. Jake nodded slowly, his mind already racing. As he walked out of that chamber, past the smug faces of species who had apparently achieved greatness through the radical strategy of never trying anything new, one thought crystallized in his head with perfect clarity. Fine. If they wanted to play it that way, humanity would build its own galactic network, with hyperspace gates, and inclusion, and probably gambling, knowing humans. They said what now? Ruby Martinez looked up from the alien tech she'd been reverse engineering, her safety goggles askew and her lab coat sporting at least 3 different types of scorch marks. Jake slumped into the chair across from her workbench, still wearing his diplomatic suit that now felt like a costume from a play nobody wanted to see. They rejected us because we're too innovative. Apparently, thinking outside the box is a negative trait in galactic politics. Ruby snorted, causing a small puff of smoke to emerge from whatever she'd been welding. Let me guess. Vextar delivered the news with maximum pomposity. He practically had a PowerPoint presentation about why conformity is the highest virtue in the universe. Jake rubbed his temples. Ruby, I need you to tell me something crazy. Crazy is my middle name. Well, technically it's Elena, but crazy works better for my reputation. She set down her plasma torch and turned to face him fully. How crazy are we talking? Accidentally create a new element crazy, or violate 3 laws of physics before breakfast crazy? I want to build our own hyperspace gate network. Ruby was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she started laughing. Not just chuckling, but full-blown, maniacal scientist laughter that echoed off the walls of her underground lab. "Oh, Jake," she wiped tears from her eyes, "you beautiful, delusional man. I've been waiting my entire career for someone to ask me to do something this monumentally stupid and brilliant. So you can do it?" "Can I do it?" "Jake, I've been doing it. Not the network part, mind you, but I've got 3 council gate cores in various states of disassembly right here." She gestured to what looked like the aftermath of a very expensive explosion. Turns out their incredibly advanced technology is actually just really overcomplicated. It's like they designed it to be impressive rather than efficient. Before Jake could respond, the lab door burst open and Dr. Finn Blackwood stumbled in, clutching a tablet and looking like he'd just witnessed the heat death of the universe. "Ruby, your latest test registered on seismic equipment 3 states away. The geological survey is asking questions and I'm running out of excuses about underground mining operations." Finn paused, noticing Jake. "Oh, hello, Ambassador. How did the council meeting go?" "About as well as Ruby's experiments, apparently," Jake said. "Finn, theoretical question. If someone wanted to build an independent hyperspace gate network that could compete with the Galactic Council's infrastructure, how impossible would that be?" Finn's tablet slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. "That's not theoretical, is it?" "Nope," Ruby chimed in cheerfully. "We're going to build the universe's most spite-driven engineering project. Want to help us probably destroy civilization as we know it?" Finn picked up his tablet with shaking hands. "Do you have any idea how many ways this could go catastrophically wrong? Hyperspace instability could tear holes in reality. One miscalculation could turn Earth into a singularity. We could accidentally connect our network to a dimension full of hostile entities. We could also succeed," Jake interrupted, "and show the entire galaxy that humans don't need permission to be awesome." Ruby was already pulling up holographic blueprints that looked suspiciously like they'd been acquired through less than official channels. "See, here's the beautiful part. The Council's gates are designed to be controlled by a central authority. Every jump has to be approved, logged, and taxed. But what if we built a network that was actually free, open to anyone who wanted to use it?" Finn stared at the blueprints, his scientific curiosity clearly warring with his survival instincts. The power requirements alone would be astronomical. We'd need to revolutionize energy production just to power one gate, let alone a network. "Good thing humans are apparently too innovative for our own good," Jake said with a grin that was probably going to get them all killed. "So, gentleman and lady, are we doing this?" Ruby was already reaching for her plasma torch. "Finn, start calculating power requirements. Jake, I need you to figure out how to keep the Council from noticing we're about to make their entire transportation monopoly obsolete. And somebody order pizza. This is going to take a while." 6 months later, the Nevada desert had become home to humanity's most ambitious construction project since the pyramids, and significantly more likely to accidentally create a black hole. Ruby stood atop a scaffold, directing a team of engineers who had all signed the most comprehensive non-disclosure agreements in human history. The gate itself was taking shape, a gleaming ring of metal and crystal that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie with a budget of several $billion. "Martinez, your power coupling is still fluctuating," Finn called out from his monitoring station, surrounded by enough warning lights to decorate a small city. "We're seeing harmonic resonance in the quantum field generators that could cascade into a complete system failure." "Define complete system failure," Ruby shouted back, but not bothering to look up from the delicate work of connecting components that shouldn't technically be able to exist in the same reality. "Everything within a 50-mile radius gets converted to its component atoms." That's Tuesday for me. Keep monitoring." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead as he coordinated with the logistics team. Keeping this project secret from the increasingly suspicious Council surveillance had required more creativity than he'd known he possessed. According to official records, they were building a solar power facility. A very large, very expensive solar power facility that required importing materials from 12 different countries and somehow needed a quantum physics team. Ambassador Morrison, his assistant Elena, appeared at his elbow, looking harried. "We've got another problem. Council Inspector Jake Morrison is requesting a site visit. Apparently our solar facility is generating unusual energy readings." Jake looked at the massive ring of alien technology that was definitely not a solar panel. "How much time do we have?" 3 days. "Ruby," Jake called out. "We need to run a test. Now." "No." "Now?" Finn appeared as if summoned by Jake's impending doom. "We haven't run a full diagnostic on the quantum matrix. The power core hasn't been properly calibrated. The safety protocols aren't even finished being written." "Finn, my dear, paranoid friend," Ruby climbed down from her perch, grinning like someone who'd just been told Christmas was early this year. "Safety protocols are just suggestions written by people who lack imagination." She strode over to the control panel, which looked like it had been designed by someone who thought regular spaceships weren't complicated enough. "Besides, we've run 17 simulations. 16 of them didn't end with the destruction of reality as we know it." "What about the 17th? Jake asked, then immediately regretted it. "That one was really spectacular. I've got it saved as a screensaver." Finn was rapidly approaching what psychologists would term a complete nervous breakdown. "Ruby, we need at least another month of testing. The field harmonics are still unstable. The power draw could overload the entire Western electrical grid. We don't even know if the targeting system works properly." "Only one way to find out." Ruby's hand hovered over what was either the activation switch or the universal destruction button. Honestly, with Ruby's design philosophy, it could be both. Jake found himself in the strange position of being the voice of reason, which was not a role he'd ever expected to play. "Where exactly are we targeting for the first test?" Ruby consulted her tablet. "I figured we'd start small. There's a nice little asteroid about 3 light-years away. Uninhabited, no strategic value, perfect for our first attempt at rewriting the laws of physics." The countdown began, and Jake realized there was a very real possibility that this would be the last thing he ever witnessed. The gate began to hum, a sound that seemed to vibrate in dimensions he didn't know existed. Energy crackled along the ring's surface, creating patterns that were almost hypnotically beautiful. "Power levels at 70%, Finn announced, his voice tight with controlled panic. 80%, Ruby added, looking like a kid on Christmas morning. 90%, and I'm detecting some concerning spatial distortions in the local area." "Concerning how?" Jake asked. "Well, the good news is we're not creating a black hole. And the bad news? We might be creating something worse." The gate erupted in brilliant light, and suddenly Jake was looking through a window to somewhere else entirely. Through the shimmering portal, he could see the asteroid Ruby had targeted, floating peacefully in space exactly where it was supposed to be. They'd done it. Humanity had just built its own hyperspace gate. "Ruby," Jake said quietly, "you magnificent, terrifying genius. It works." "Of course it works," Ruby replied, but her voice carried a note of amazement even she couldn't hide. "Though I have to admit I wasn't entirely sure we wouldn't accidentally connect to the Council's central hub and cause a diplomatic incident." Finn was staring at his readings with an expression of scientific wonder mixed with existential terror. "The efficiency ratings are off the charts. This isn't just working, it's working better than Council technology." Jake smiled, and for the first time in months it felt genuine. "Gentlemen, lady, I think it's time to make some phone calls. We're about to become the most popular humans in the galaxy." 3 weeks later, Earth's first public hyperspace gate stood gleaming in what had formerly been the Nevada test site, and was now being called the Sol Transportation Hub. Jake stood at a podium facing a crowd of reporters, diplomats, and beings from across the galaxy who'd somehow heard about humanity's little engineering project. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient life forms," Jake began, his voice carrying across the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd just pulled off the impossible. "Welcome to Earth's inaugural hyperspace gate activation." In the VIP section, Vextar sat with several other council members, their expressions ranging from outrage to deeply concerned. Jake had made sure they had front-row seats for this particular show. "As you know," Jake continued, "the Galactic Council recently informed humanity that we lacked the technological sophistication for membership in their organization. They suggested we spend the next 1,000 years learning to appreciate the beauty of conformity." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Even some of the alien species seemed to find the Council's reasoning amusing. "Well, we took their advice to heart. We spent the last 6 months learning about conformity. Specifically, we learned that we're really bad at it." Ruby stepped forward, wearing what she'd insisted was her formal lab coat, which was identical to her regular lab coat, except for the addition of a bow tie. "What Ambassador Morrison is trying to say is that we built our own gate network, with hyperspace capabilities that exceed Council standards by approximately 300%. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Several species Jake didn't recognize were furiously taking notes. "But here's the really interesting part," Jake said, raising his voice over the commotion. "Unlike the Council's network, which requires membership fees, travel permits, and adherence to approximately 17,000 regulations, Earth's network has one simple requirement for access." He paused for dramatic effect, a technique he'd learned from Vextar himself. "Don't be a jerk." Vextar stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. "This is preposterous. You cannot simply ignore millennia of established galactic law and create your own transportation network." "Actually." Finn stepped up to the microphone, clutching a tablet full of legal research. "According to Galactic Treaty 447b, any species not currently under Council jurisdiction is free to develop independent infrastructure. Since Earth was denied membership, we're technically not bound by Council regulations." Jake had to give Finn credit. For someone who'd spent the last 6 months convinced they were all going to die horribly, he'd certainly done his homework. "Furthermore," Ruby added with a grin that suggested she was enjoying this way too much, "we've already received applications from 47 species who were also denied Council membership for various bureaucratic reasons. Turns out there are a lot of civilizations out there who got tired of waiting for permission to be awesome." The crowd was buzzing now. Jake could see representatives from species he'd never heard of comparing notes and making what looked suspiciously like travel arrangements. "So," Jake said, "who wants to see this thing in action?" The gate hummed to life, its surface shimmering with energies that made reality itself seem negotiable. Through the portal, the crowd could see the surface of Kepler 442 billion, a planet that had been requesting Council membership for over 200 years and had been told they needed to develop better diplomatic protocols. "Our first official destination," Jake announced, "is the Kepler system, where the Nexari have been waiting patiently for the Council's approval since before my species invented agriculture. They've agreed to be our inaugural partner in what we're calling the Independent Worlds Transit Network." A delegation of Nexari stepped through the portal, their crystalline forms refracting the Nevada sunlight in patterns that were almost musical. Their leader, who introduced herself as Resonance of Joy, spoke in harmonics that the translation devices could barely process. "The Nexari people are honored to be humanity's first partners in this endeavor." The translation came through as a melody. "We have much to offer each other, free from the restrictions of bureaucratic oversight." Vextar was making sounds that the universal translator was rendering as various forms of outrage. "This is chaos. This is anarchy. You cannot simply ignore the established order." Jake turned to face him, and for a moment, Every diplomatic instinct he'd developed over 3 years of dealing with council bureaucracy crystallized into perfect clarity. "Counselor Vextar," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "you told us we were too innovative, too independent, too disruptive for your organization. Congratulations. You were absolutely right." The crowd erupted in applause, and Jake realized that humanity had just accidentally become the cool kids of the galaxy. 6 months after the grand opening, Earth's Sol transportation hub had become the busiest spaceport in known space, and Jake was beginning to understand why the Council had been so concerned about disruption. Ambassador Morrison, his assistant Elena, burst into his office carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone who'd been juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. "We have a situation." Jake looked up from the latest membership applications. They were up to 127 species now, including several that the Council had apparently forgotten existed. What kind of situation? Ruby accidentally created a new form of matter situation, or Finn discovered we're violating the laws of physics in ways that could unravel reality situation. Worse, the Council is requesting permission to use our network. Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "Counselor Vextar is in the waiting area. He wants to discuss the possibility of the Council joining the Independent Worlds Transit Network as, and I quote, valued partners in galactic transportation infrastructure." Jake leaned back in his chair and started laughing. It started as a chuckle but quickly escalated into the kind of laughter that suggested either perfect joy or complete mental breakdown. "Sir?" Elena looked concerned. "Elena, do you remember what Vextar told us 6 months ago? About how we needed to learn the beauty of conformity. He said humanity was too disruptive for the established order." "Right, and now he wants to join our network because," Jake consulted his notes, "apparently their gate system is experiencing efficiency challenges compared to our infrastructure." The irony was so perfect it was almost artistic. Ruby's modifications to the original Council technology had made Earth's gates faster, more reliable, and significantly cheaper to operate. Species that had been paying Council fees for millennia were discovering they could travel for free through Earth's network, and word was spreading fast. "There's more," Elena continued. "We've detected several Council ships using our gates without authorization. They're accessing our network through partner species and claiming it's for diplomatic missions." Jake's laughter reached new heights. "They're sneaking onto our network. The same network they said would cause chaos and anarchy? It gets better. According to Ruby's monitoring systems, Council network usage is down 40% since our grand opening. Apparently, when given the choice between paying exorbitant fees and following thousands of regulations versus traveling for free with a single rule about not being jerks, most people choose the latter." Before Jake could respond, Ruby burst through the door with Finn close behind, both of them looking like they'd just discovered something either wonderful or terrible. "Jake, you need to see this." Ruby was practically vibrating with excitement. "We've been monitoring Council communications, and they're panicking. Their entire economic model was based on controlling galactic transportation. Without that monopoly, they're hemorrhaging influence and revenue." Finn, looking more relaxed than Jake had seen him in months, added, "The really interesting part is that several Council member species have started questioning why they need the Council at all. When your primary function is controlling access to something that's now freely available, your relevance becomes questionable." Jake stood up, straightening his tie in a gesture that had become habitual during moments of diplomatic significance. "Elena, please show Counselor Vextar in. I think it's time we had a conversation about the beauty of innovation." Vextar entered the office with considerably less swagger than he'd displayed at their last meeting. His usual parade of attendants was absent, and his ceremonial robes looked somehow diminished under the fluorescent lights of Jake's very human office. "Ambassador Morrison," Vextar began, his voice lacking its previous authority, "I trust you're enjoying your little experiment in transportation management." "Oh, we're having a blast," Jake replied cheerfully. Amazing what you can accomplish when you focus on actually helping people instead of maintaining artificial scarcity. But I'm sure you didn't come here to congratulate us on our success. Vextar's expression could have soured milk. The Council is prepared to offer humanity associate membership in exchange for integration of your network with our existing infrastructure. Jake pretended to consider this generous offer. Let me make sure I understand. You want us to give you access to the network you said would cause chaos, so you can continue charging species for the privilege of traveling through space? The established order requires proper oversight. Vextar, Jake interrupted. Let me save us both some time. The answer is no, but I have a counter-proposal. The alien's four eyes focused on Jake with renewed attention. The Council is welcome to apply for membership in the Independent Worlds Transit Network, just like everyone else. You'll need to agree to our terms, which include free access for all member species and adherence to our single rule about not being jerks. Vextar sputtered. You're asking the Galactic Council to join your organization? I'm offering the Galactic Council the opportunity to remain relevant, Jake corrected. But the choice is yours. You can either adapt to the new reality or watch your influence continue to decline as more species discover they don't need permission to explore the galaxy. 1 year after the Council's rejection, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Sol Transportation Hub, watching ships from dozens of species come and go through humanity's network of hyperspace gates. The facility had grown from a single gate in the Nevada desert to a sprawling complex that rivaled the Council's central hub in size and far exceeded it in traffic. Ruby appeared beside him, her latest project a portable gate generator that could fit in a suitcase tucked under her arm. Finn's running the final calculations on the Andromeda connection. Turns out our network is stable enough to handle intergalactic distances. Of course it is, Jake replied. Because apparently when humans decide to overachieve, we don't do it halfway. Through the massive windows, they could see the latest arrivals, a council delegation led by Vextar himself, who was finally submitting the formal application for council membership in the Independent Worlds Transit Network. The once mighty bureaucrat looked distinctly uncomfortable as he filled out paperwork designed by humans who had learned everything they knew about bureaucracy from being victims of it. You know, Ruby mused, when we started this project, I thought we were just building a transportation network. Turns out we accidentally created a galactic revolution. Jake nodded. Funny how that works. We set out to prove we were good enough for their club, and ended up making their club irrelevant. Finn joined them at the window, looking remarkably calm for someone whose greatest fear had been accidentally destroying civilization. The final usage statistics are in. Our network is now handling 67% of all galactic traffic. The Council's network is down to mostly ceremonial functions and species that haven't heard about the alternatives yet. And the membership applications, 214 species and counting. We've had to start a waiting list, not because we're exclusive, but because Ruby's engineering teams can't build gates fast enough to keep up with demand. Jake watched as Vextar's delegation was escorted through the standard orientation process, but where they would learn about concepts like customer service and user-friendly interfaces. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. You know what the really beautiful part is? Jake said. They were right about us being disruptive. They just didn't realize that disruption was exactly what the galaxy needed. A year ago, galactic civilization had been controlled by a bureaucratic oligarchy that treated space travel like a privilege to be rationed. Today, a bartender from Alpha Centauri could decide to visit the art galleries of Vega Prime on a whim, and the only requirement was that they treat their fellow travelers with basic decency. Elena's been tracking the broader effects, Finn continued. Trade is up 400%. Cultural exchange programs are exploding. We've had 17 first contact scenarios just this month as species that were previously isolated gain access to the broader galactic community. Ruby grinned. And the best part? It all started because some purple-skinned bureaucrat thought humans were too innovative for their own good. Jake's communicator chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and smiled. Speaking of innovation, we just received our first application from outside the local group. Apparently, word of our little transportation revolution has reached the Magellanic Clouds. Are we ready for intergalactic expansion? Finn asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Finn, my friend, Jake replied, adjusting his tie one last time. We're humans. Being ready is overrated. We specialize in figuring it out as we go along. Outside the window, ships from 100 worlds continued their dance through the gates that had transformed the galaxy not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the simple revolutionary act of making something better and sharing it freely. As Jake watched Vex Tar awkwardly navigate the paperwork required to join the organization he had once dismissed, he reflected on the beautiful irony of it all. The Council had rejected humanity for being too innovative, too disruptive, too unwilling to conform to established patterns. They had been absolutely, completely, perfectly right. And that, Jake thought with satisfaction, was exactly why they had failed. The galaxy was a much more interesting place when humans were allowed to be themselves, and everyone else was invited along for the ride. No permission required,